G'day Bomber fans, another Q&A. I thought I would do one of these after the trade period because there is a lot to discuss. I was getting loads of comments and I couldn't really reply to all of them, so I've got to do one of these. So cheers for giving me questions, I'm just going to get into it. Alrighty, a good question here. Should Essendon use their second round picks, currently 31 and 35, to move up the order, and would other clubs be interested? I think other clubs would definitely be interested, but I look at this draft, which I've been looking at for a while now. There's a clear top 10 or 11 or 12, and after that there are, I'd say, groups. There's a bunch of groups around the top 25 area I find hard to split, but from 25 onwards, I really struggle to find an order, and that isn't a good or bad thing because we don't really know how good the latter stages of this draft are, but if we bundle those picks to move up to, let's say, an early 20 pick, because that is what we would get from it, I don't know if we would be better off than having two selections 10 picks later, just because the depth of this draft is unpredictable, and really only 15 or so players look set to be real no-brainer picks. There are lots of risks around. I think it should also be noted the form of some of the most talented players has been poor, so there are bound to be some steals around as well. I'm personally happy with picks 31 and 35. I think once you get to the second round, it's a bit up in the air this year. A lot of players similar quality. I'd rather two later picks, slightly later, into the round than an early second rounder. Kyle King, a regular commenter, cheers mate. They ask, what players do you think Essendon should look at next year? Looking at the areas we need fixed most, it's hard to say before the season started because things could change. Harry Jones could come out and perform. Setterfield could be that big-bodied mid, but looking at positions we need, I would say a key forward is the most important, and I think you guys would agree. And luckily there are a few available. I think Todd Marshall and Jamari Ugle-Hagan will be talked about a lot. Logan McDonald too. There are heaps of players coming out of contract. Rumours will be swirling all year. Ben King as well. I forgot about him. That's the most important one. So those are the players I think will be talked about in relation to us and other clubs until they re-sign. Alright, Sammy asks a question. It's been answered in the comments, but I'm quickly going to go over it for anyone unaware of how compensation works. So some think we paid North Melbourne pick 3 for Ben McKay because they got pick 3 in return. When you're a free agent, you can move to a club without a trade being made. That wasn't a trade, so that's what happened with McKay. When that happens, the AFL will compensate the club losing their player with a draft pick, and the worth of the draft pick will be based on the terms of the new contract for the leaving player, so length, salary, bonuses. They look into that and decide what the club, in this case North Melbourne, receive, and it fit the criteria for a band 1 compensation, which for North is pick 3, so the AFL gave them that pick. Now, a few are also confused as to why it's pick 3 and not pick 5 or 6. If it's band 1, it comes after the selection of your first pick, so if we lost a player and got the same compensation, we would have gotten pick 10, so we didn't give anything up. We did overpay him a tad though. Alright, I got two similar questions here. Dylan asks if Dersma is in our best 22. Jack asks if I see Dersma taking over Durham or Martin on the wing. I see him taking Durham's spot. I think he is a more complete player. Durham is defensively accountable, which I like. He's always back there lending a hand. His gut running helps him drift back a bit, but I think he lacks that attacking prowess that Martin and Dersma have. Dersma is a similar player. He's a good mark, flies for the ball without thinking about his own body, but he roams forward as well as back, and I think that's what you get with him over Durham. He can go both ways, so I think he is our number 2 winger in the pecking order. Martin's still first though. Luca asks if Essendon should be looking at a small defender or winger. I'm guessing in the draft, because he goes on to talk about Harry Di Mattia and Lance Collard and whether they could bring anything to Essendon. We'll start there because I really like both those players. I think they would both definitely bring something to Essendon. The issue is I doubt we get to them. They will both be drafted before pick 31. Di Mattia is a smaller midfielder forward, really quick, explosive. Lance Collard, he has shot up after the combine, more of a natural forward. I love the look of him too, but I would say we miss out. As for defenders or wingers, there are a few good options for both, which I will highlight more later on in a video. And in this video, but Joel Frazier could be a decent late pickup for wing depth, but I think a smaller defender is almost a necessity in this draft. We don't have depth. There are a bunch of around, Tao Jiath, Lamont Lowell, Nathan Phillips-Tides, Angus Hasty, some really decent options. I'd be disappointed if we didn't draft a general defender. It's an area we really need some youth in. What happens if 2 meter Peter goes down again? I think we managed fine without him, and hopefully this time around we have players available. Harry Jones, Sam Wiedemann, Kyle Langford as a second or third forward. I think we have depth to manage the loss of Wright, but we don't have depth to improve our forward line structure even with him there. We have role players, but no one else to take a game apart. So I don't think losing Wright is necessarily the issue, but it's the fact we don't have anyone else like him, and it will be hard to see Langford having a season that good again. I think we get caught out from a key forward perspective in 2024, but it won't be because of a lack of depth, just a lack of true game-changing talent. Speaking of key forwards, we have a question about them. It's a double header. Who should we re-sign out of those contract players? I don't really care for any of them too much. I wouldn't mind Voss or Hunter on the rookie list. If I had to choose one, maybe Hunter, to be honest. I see his ceiling being higher from the limited exposure we've seen. And who should Essendon take in the draft? Keyback like Ollie Murphy or forward like Nate Caddy. I doubt Caddy falls to us at pick 9, which will turn into pick 11 with matched bids. I would like him. After him, it's pretty lean for forwards until the second round. Keybacks, there are quite a few around. Ollie Murphy is one tip to go in the first round. Could well be around our pick. If I had to choose a young player to bring in without looking at picks and plays, it would be a key forward though. Just because I think we have good young keybacks developing. I think Zach Reed, Nick Cox, Lewis Hayes, that's more promising than what we have up forward. Thoughts on retired and delisted players? Shannon asks, yeah, ideally Phillips played on another year, but I like Goldstein. Tip and Woody, realistically, we lost him in 2021. He was never the same, so it's not a big loss. There aren't any big changes to our team from an outgoing point of view, so that's a good thing. I reckon that will change in the coming years, considering Heppel and Shield and Goldie and Stringer are getting on. Oliver asks if we should have traded Dylan Shield. I don't know. I think it's a tough one. I think when a player is winding down, it's really hard to find trade value. The last thing we want to do is trade out Dylan Shield for a pick in the 30s and see him tear up at St Kilda. I think either way it makes sense. It makes sense to free up space for younger players, but Shield at his best is one of our best, so it makes sense to keep him till his contract is up, which is only a year. I'm not fussed either way. I don't think it's a bad decision to keep him or let him go. Jaden asks, who do I reckon would be the best out of anyone in Essendon's team? List a player from every spot. I think that's the question. I think it's hard. Best is hard to say because you would say Merritt is the best. He's definitely our best midfielder, but I almost think Ridley is our most important player. So he's our best defender. Ruck, I think Goldstein now, if he plays at the standard he has set his career, he's an all-time great stoppage ruck. Forward is a bit trickier. You could say Peter Wright. Carl Langford had a great season. Jake Stringer at his best. I think I'd say Peter Wright though. Even last year he was going at almost 2 goals a game and we were giving him crap for it. So there you go. Ridley, Goldie, Merritt, and Wright. Hope that answers your question. Alrighty, a long question here from Dro K. Great question, but I won't read it all out. Feel free to do that yourself. The basic gist is, has Essendon spent too much time looking for depth through the draft rather than adding meaningful development? And examples are listed, which is good, like McGrath playing in the midfield because of the addition of Sard, or Francis not getting game time because of trades. I think it's a bit harder than that with younger players. So McGrath was a midfielder in his draft year. He has that midfielder burst of speed, but I think we just discovered he couldn't hack it. And Francis, as for Francis, it raises a good point with development. I never really thought Francis looked settled. Some will say it's because he hasn't played or didn't play enough, and some will say that's why we didn't play him, because he didn't look settled. So it kind of goes both ways. It's a bit of a catch-22. You can have similar discussions with Parrish in the guts, like you mentioned. Was the 2021 turning point because he moved to the midfield permanently, or did he show enough to warrant being moved there? I reckon Perkins will have a similar theme to his career eventually, and we will say the same thing. But I always think you should play the best team you can. It's all well and good playing Aaron Francis regularly until he gets good instead of Michael Hartley or whoever was there at the time, but that's only going to set us back from a results point of view, which is sometimes why you need to trade in options to fix current issues. Some will say we don't need Mackay because we have Zach Reed or Lewis Hayes for the future, and their development could well be halted by the inclusion of Mackay, but I would rather the team be better off with a more mature option. But I get where you're coming from, especially in the case of Francis. I think we didn't draft a dud. We ruined his career. We moved him around almost every week. We never really let him get settled, and I think that's important. Even through the VFL, it's important you keep players' development steady by not shifting them every fortnight. Great question. Definitely not an easy one to answer. I think as a whole, our development is on a level below most clubs. It's a bit strange how we always seem to win the trade period every year but can't win a final. Just wondering, what were Essendon's best and worst draft selections of the past decade? Hello, Trish. I was thinking of doing a video on this actually, closer to the draft, and now that you've asked, I probably will, just because it shows people are thinking on the same wavelength. I will name a few though here. We're going to start with the best. Zach Merritt, second round, is pretty good. Hard to beat that. We actually have a few of the second rounders, Jordan Ridley, Mason Redman, but a 3-time All-Australian at pick 26. That's the best of the last decade, I would say. As for worst, Aaron Francis probably takes the cake. Picking him ahead of 2 Coleman medalists in Mackay and Curnow was annoying. I reckon when I make my video, I'm going to expand to this century, just because Dodoro was doing some of his weird stuff in the early 2000s. It's been a lot tamer this decade, and that's saying something because he has had some weird calls. One that sticks with me is Elliot Kavanagh. Actually, I think he was taken at pick 17 or 18. No one remembers him at all. Alex Morgan is another that sticks with me. He was an early second rounder. And this is out of left field, but Lachlan Johnson, we drafted him after he did his ACL later on in the draft as well, like pick round 4. But I never saw anything out of him that made me understand that selection. That was a really weird one. Excusable though, considering he was much later in the draft. And finally, David asks if there are any key forwards we can pick up at the draft. Not many, to be honest, David. Nate Caddy's kind of a key forward, a bit smaller. Langford vibes, a bit more mobile. I doubt he falls to us with pick 9. I think he is gone by the time we choose. And after that, pick 31, you got Archer Reed, the brother of Zach. You got Logan Morris, who I like, another undersized key, but very strong. Great contested mark. That's about it, though. There might be some basement options, but I can't think of any that I'm overly excited about off the top of my head, but that's all. All questions done as well. Cheers for watching, guys. Cheers for answering my questions. I'll do another one of these eventually. Plenty of good questions. Hope I answered them to your liking, but that's all. Cheers for watching, Bomber fans. Like and subscribe.